What do you think of the Pearl?
Pearl's the best bar in America.
I agree.
There's no point in me beating around the bush. My brother Alec and I went drinking last night, and we had a hell of a time. And somehow, it's a new dawn, it's a new day, and we're about to do it all over again.
You will be the first non-Angels Envy people, to my knowledge, to get to try it, so that's pretty neat.
Yeah, thank you for that.
You're willing to testify in court over that fact?
Yeah, I'll give it a go. There's a milk company in Kansas City that had all these, like a root beer flavored milk, and just outside the box things that I always wanted to try, weird combinations of flavors, and maybe that's influenced where I've found myself now.
This is Owen Martin, one of the friendliest guys in all of whiskey. He is the master distiller at Angels Envy, and he found himself here with stops in Arkansas and Scotland before that. But he was born and raised in Kansas City, Kansas.
I had started homebrewing in college, as a poor college student does to finance their drinking habit, I guess. So my background kind of flowed through that. I went to KU for mechanical engineering. By the end of that, I knew that wasn't quite what I wanted to do. When I turned 21, I didn't go to clubs. I went to the local microbrewery, and I was the guy who always had to mix a 6-packs when everybody else was drinking, domestics or vodka or whatever the heck. I was always curious about drinks, very much a kamikaze soda guy, I guess, which maybe sets the stage for blending in a much more refined way later. I started looking at brewing schools in the US, and in retrospect, kind of at that time, I believe was probably the height of craft beer in the US. So all the brewing schools were waitlisted. They were really just certificates that were pretty damn expensive. And so I just kind of was Googling around and started looking abroad, and found a place called Harriet Watt University in Edinburgh, Scotland. And it was a master's degree. It was a master's degree in both brewing and distilling science. And you had to have a technical degree to apply. So I was like, whoa, all the pieces just fell into place. In the meantime, I bothered all the local places saying look, I'm applying to this program. I think this is what I'm gonna do. So by the time I'd gone to Scotland, I had developed a little bit of an actual technical background there. But basically, I just tell people that you live in Scotland long enough, you drink enough scotch in the beautiful pubs of Edinburgh and Scotland, that it didn't take long to kind of take a hard pivot from beer into whiskey. But for a variety of reasons, my visa ran out, I ran out of money. My now wife was saying, get the hell back home. So moved back home, moved straight from Edinburgh to Little Rock, Arkansas, which was about as intense a reverse culture shock as you can put yourself through. But I moved to a little mom and pop bourbon place and just made bourbon for a couple of years, and really kind of viewed that as almost like the second piece of my schooling.
After cutting his teeth in Arkansas at a mom and pop bourbon shop, Owen got the attention of American single malt pioneer Stranahan's.
So after 2 years, we packed up from Arkansas, moved to Colorado, and Stranahan's ended up being the perfect place to land. There I kind of started back at the bottom. I was actually the night brewer, night distiller, and just through time worked my way up. By the end, what I was doing there, a lot of the R&D was in cask finishing. Even though it was a single malt whiskey, our special releases were more often than not cask finished in blends of different finishes. And so when the Angels Envy job kind of came up, and we're making bourbon, we're making rye here, but the finishing and the innovation through finishing was the common thread between Colorado and here. I felt like I kind of had been called up,
I want to sort of pause for a moment. I mean, we're not actually stopping, but I want to change directions before I get into the rest of this episode. I've been struggling with how to tell this story. Not because it isn't interesting or that it's particularly dramatic. We're going to talk about a very nice distillery which was kind enough to share a new bottle with us. in hopes that when you watch this episode, the one you're watching right now of Whiskeyland, you'll consider your own visit to that distillery and perhaps a purchase of that bottle. That's sort of the unspoken exchange. We all know it, and frankly, we're okay with that part of it. But I just can't. I know, this is getting a bit meta, but stick with me, and I'll stick with you. I have an unease, to say the least, with being what I feel sometimes can be sort of subservient to the desire of brands or corporations. But I also know that within marketing strategies at these big companies, they have all these smart, bright, and sincere folks. And there is a true narrative. There's a real story happening with real people, and I'm interested in that. And much like tasting a new bourbon, that's what we are always looking for. That interesting next layer, that lingering question in the finish that begs you to ask for one more sip. So that has become my mission. And if I'm being honest, I've been a little hard of hearing, struggling to know where to look. I need inspiration. So last night, I went for a walk. And I saw a Little League at a gas station picnic table, having a celebratory ice cream cone. I honestly didn't know if they won or they lost, or I guess it doesn't really matter, but I'm certain it was a celebration for a game well played, for teamwork, for another spring night on the field, with friends, with cheering parents. And I thought of my dad, frustratingly patient, teaching me to catch a baseball, hoping time would work the fear of the ball out of my system. It would not. And I thought of Alec having that same kind of experience just 7 or so years later. A different parent, a different patience. My dad was older and wiser. And with my feet planted in the proverbial river of memories, I thought to myself, same river, but also different river. This is still our bond. Our collective memory of Little League and playing baseball with our dad, albeit at different times, is a memory we both share. We are brothers in bond. Okay, so that brings me back to Owen, a very pleasant dude with a super just book of knowledge in his brain. So I want to get really nerdy and soak in the wisdom that Owen imparts into every bottle he's working on.
Part of everybody's job here is education. Like, what even is finishing? There's a whole lot of people that don't even know what it is. To me, again, when you take a nod more towards Scotch and Irish whiskey and the fact that this has been done for decades and decades, you're playing off your base spirit. To me, finishing isn't about just slathering a big bunch of flavor on. I think we talked about that with using different fills, first fill, second fill, to create that nuance. But it's about highlighting or sometimes contrasting what the attributes of the base whiskey are. All your flavors in a release should be in ratio and balance with each other. Whether that's, I have a high proof release, I'm gonna use a heavier finishing cask or maybe a sweeter finishing cask or an older base bourbon, right? So that dry oak tannin character can balance the sweetness, can still cut through with your base whiskey character. Or, hey, I know I have a low proof release. Like, I wanna use a subtle finishing cask, something that's been filled multiple times or something that really didn't have a hugely strong flavor to begin with. And so whatever the release is, it's understanding what your proof point is, what your base whiskey age is, what your base whiskey grain bill is, and playing a finishing cask against that.
So I'm watching this footage, thinking about that wonderful tasting, and I remembered about a week prior to this, we had a conversation with my dad about finishing, and he held a strong position.
What do you think?
Adding flavor.
No, it's delicious, but it's kind of cheating as well.
Cheating?
Yeah.
You don't think it's innovation?
No, it's wonderful stuff.
I think
That's not my point. My
You're
point is
delineating
that,
categories.
that bourbon specifically is defined, right?
It's a one
as
barrel
white
pot.
dog added to a
One barrel.
one first time used.
What about toasted or double oaked?
Same thing.
To add flavor to the white dog.
Yeah,
age
it's
it.
kind
Go
of
on.
cheating.
You think it's cheating? Oh,
But
you see
I
it's
love
cheating.
it. I love it, right? I love double
Okay.
oak.
I see what you're saying.
no.
You're not
Not-
going to drink it because of that. You're just
No.
saying it's not bourbon the way bourbon is categorized.
Exactly.
So I'm not gonna say I don't see where they're coming from, especially with bourbon, right? Like it is a very specific category, and so I can only imagine the early days of Angel's Envy. They got that feedback a lot more than people do today, when damn near every big brand has a finished whiskey, and a lot of those brands are probably the ones that were giving us grief in the early days. But again, it's just continued education. It's putting liquid in front of people that think like that, and then speaking to it. And I think I feel comfortable betting on myself that I can get in front of somebody like that and change their mind. Why would I consider that cheating? That's just that's like being a chef or creating something and using all the tools that you have at your disposal.
Angel's Envy says specifically that it's bourbon finished in a cask.
Yeah,
finished
yeah.
in a.
Every time it touches wood, you're adding flavor. You mean
think
adding
Devin's
adding a
right.
different distillate? Wine is different.
Wine is
It's a different
If
fermented
you're
juice.
infusing wine, I can understand.
No, but
you're not.
when you're aging it in a wine barrel,
That's
you're
wine in
adding
the
a
wood.
different flavor.
So way
When you're
back,
adding it to a wood, you're adding oak flavor, which is part of bourbon.
way back
It's
when
okay for
when
bourbon to have
bourbon
oak
was
flavor.
a big deal, right?
Yeah, it's just the way you're saying. You keep saying. Add
So
flavor.
they were bringing
You wanna add
distillate
flavor.
in, and they were trying to cover up the flavor, the poor flavor, or the harsh flavor, by adding shit to it. Right? These guys are trying to take bourbon as it is and add some stuff to it to make it better, or to make it different. That's okay, but it's not technically. It's not bourbon anymore. Angel's Envy is not bourbon.
No,
You don't think it's bourbon?
It's not bourbon.
it's bourbon finished.
It's
I don't
it's a
know.
bourbon
Finished in a cask
finished in
barrel.
a port cask.
You can add a few words, but
I think I know.
that's-
I think I know what you mean, because it's important, because when you look back
No, it is.
historically,
I agree.
they made that set of standards because there wasn't a set of standards.
And that set of standards is what created Bottle and Bond. And Bottle and Bond has allowed for whiskey drinkers, bourbon drinkers, for a long time to have a shared experience.
Angel's Envy applied a concept, which is wine finishing, more seen historically in Scotch, to bourbon, right? So combining concepts from one spirit category with another. And to me, I was like, well, what's cooler than combining concepts within a spirit category, right? Everyone loves, cask strength. Everybody wants their cask strength single barrel. Our specialty release every year is cask strength. That's kind of our year in, year out cask strength bourbon release that people line up for. But within a category, Bottle and Bond, which really doesn't have any innovation, well, very little. Grain bills, I guess, would be the exception. But it's not meant to be innovative. Like Bottle and Bond is meant to be standardized, right? Like it is a proof of quality.
Yeah.
And so to be able to innovate in a category which really isn't meant for innovation, and to do it at casting, I was like, that's still combining concepts. And to me, like, what's more Angel's Envy than that? So I just had to say that enough times.
Yeah.
And then finally we
No,
got
I
into
get
the door.
that. Well, I'm curious. So what do you mean by that at cask strength?
Yeah.
It has to be 100 proof.
Yeah, let me tell you. So these barrels were filled in spring of 2018. They were filled at 103 entry proof. So very low, actually a historic entry proof that people used to do before the ability to legally enter it higher came about. So that, combined with the knowledge of how maturation works, where you put your barrel and what happens in terms of loss out of those barrels, the Angels share, how much alcohol, how much water you lose, and how your proof changes with respect to that. These barrels were put in a very cool part of the warehouse, right? So in a very cool, humid part of the warehouse, you lose slightly more alcohol and water, and so your proof gradually goes down. And since they were entered at 103 over the course of 5+ years, gradually went down. So by the time we tested them, when I was first messing around, they were around 99 proof. So not far off 100, but not Bottle and Bond, because Bottle and Bond has to be exactly 100. But understanding what the stipulations for Bottle and Bond are, that it's really just one distilling season, then we also had access to barrels we'd held back from spring of 2018 that were our standard fill proof. And so when I talk about blending, normally we talk about it with respect to flavor, but in this case, we were blending 99 proof stuff with about 122 proof stuff and finding the balance there to hit 100. And each of those brought different flavors into the mix. The 122 proof pulling more oak, kind of a very classic bourbon profile. The low proof, not pulling as much oak, so a very soft profile, honeyed, I guess you would say, and being able to combine those two to make what's in front of you. There are some cool blending flavor attributes to that as well. So that lower entry alcohol and water are both gonna pull out different compounds from your barrel. They're gonna solubilize different compounds from your barrel. And so when you have that lower proof, one, the color's pretty light. This is almost 6 years old.
Yeah, wow.
Where if it was in the top floors of a rick, it would have pulled a ton of color out, a ton of wood. This is very, very soft in comparison. So I said, instead of thinking like big dark caramels and oak, it's soft like honey, like even honey nut kind of Cheerios flavor. So I've been trying to workshop this. I don't know if summer sipper is quite the right phrase, but I do think it could be a summer whiskey insofar that it's just very light and very enjoyable to drink. Drinks well under the proof, in my opinion.
Well, from June to August on Instagram, it's called a summer sipper.
There you go.
As soon as it's October,
It's,
there's
a winter
sipper. The
fall,
phenomenal,
so marketing in action right there.
So here we are, having the privilege to be the first non-Angels Envy people to try their new bottle and bond. And guess what?
That nose is
We
beautiful.
loved it.
Yeah, and I
It's a
think
marshmallow.
Oh, wow.
And I think the body's really nice and rounded from that as well, because again, there was no water addition to that. Like, this is really what just came out of the barrel.
Oh,
again,
wow,
some
it's
high proof
crazy.
stuff added in there.
I am so stoked about this.
Yeah.
That's innovation right
Yeah.
there.
Right.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
To hit 100 and be cask strength.
Right. So yeah, I think this
love
is
that.
going to be a very
Oh, that's a
successful
hit.
thing.
Yeah, that's a hit. We got ourselves a banger.
When I was reviewing some of the projects that were down when I first walked in the door, like light bulbs went off, because in my mind, Angels Envy, to go way back, we keep talking about finishing, right? Finishing was an idea that had been used by Scotch distilleries since early 90s, maybe even or 80s before that. Certainly was commonplace in that industry. Was not commonplace here. So it was taking a concept utilized to make whiskey in Scotland and applying it to American whiskey in kind of the first big meaningful way. And so I was like, absolutely. When I heard that, I was like, we have the option and the opportunity to do a cask strength and bottle and bond, and in the very same sense, combine categories in a way that hadn't been done. And so I think when I reframed it in that way, and then sort of got to know my brand team a little better, and just kept putting it forward, we eventually kind of all got on the same page and were able to execute on it. To me, like innovation and where we can continue to push Angels Envy, we're always going to do finishing and find innovative ways to finish and combine finishes.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, this idea of having to kind of carry your tradition, honor your tradition, but Angels Envy, just by the nature of its history, is sort of innovative from the
100%.
beginning.
Yeah, and I love that. The way I've kind of been phrasing it to some of our team members is like, if we're innovating correctly, it should feel natural.
And that's just it. Innovation can be natural. And old traditions can have new ideas. And a set of standards can create a shared experience. And you see, we have all these shared experiences throughout our lives. And they may not crisscross in linear time, but they can be felt across a generation or an age gap between siblings. It's the shared experience that I think we've been seeking this whole time. I know you must be wondering when I'll just stick to whiskey, but I'm here to tell you I have. This is the whiskey. For me, at least. This is my Whiskeyland, the mythological place that the good stuff takes us in our mind, where our family sits around a table and debates and laughs, and our shared experiences become the collective unconscious material that shapes who we are and this spirited journey we're all on. Through thick and thin, we make our way through all of this together. And it's the shared experiences that exist to remind us we are not alone. And that there's a certain magic to this life, a poetry. That's whiskey, the collective sip. One that makes even the angels, well, just a touch envious from their pillar in the heavens, watching us humans being, well, human beings.
There it is.
Here we go.
Here we go.
Here we go.
I try to get out to our warehouses. They're about 45 minutes from here. I try to get out to there every other week, and usually it's a Friday as well. So the week is wound down. The site has emptied out a little bit, and I usually just try to take a lap to myself. And not only is that kind of time for me to sort of wind down and hopefully get a little bit out of a work mindset, but it's to appreciate what we do every day and kind of what results from that, right? And then not only that, but you have the visuals, you have the smells. Normally I have thiefed something that I'm walking around and sipping, so I'm kind of processing that as well. And yeah, that is where I sort of find my solitude in an otherwise very chaotic life. Not a bad thing, but a barrel warehouse has always had an effect on me, whether I'm on a forklift or on foot, of kind of a calming sensation, I guess you could say.
Well, this is great. Thank you for this and for this opportunity to taste that. A historic pour.
Right.
Yeah, a historic pour. I don't know why you let us do it first, but
I think you got it down to timing. You know, sometimes you walk in the door the right day.
just good. Like, oof, we keep doing that somehow, Alec.
Yeah.
Right place, right time.